Here with Mike with more tips.
Hey folks, today we're going to talk a little bit about movies because if you're a reader or writer, you love movies. That's just another form of storytelling, specifically tactics in movies, military movies. We go to see a movie and they have to figure out how they're going to win the war. So a lot of planning goes into that. This is analogous to comics, especially when you have a fight sequence in comics. And I've discussed fight sequences in comics here before about how people want to see the technique unfold in a realistic and dynamic manner. Well, the same thing is true of movies, particularly military movies. How do they win? How do they outsmart a larger opponent? I think we all love the films of Ridley Scott, not all of them, but most of them. And Ridley Scott directed Alien. He directed All the Money in the World, which I highly recommend, but he also has done a number of military movies, specifically Gladiator and Kingdom of Heaven. Mm-hmm. Now, to me, Gladiator was a very frustrating movie. I enjoy it very much. I'll watch it again. It's a brilliant movie. But when it comes to tactics, especially on the battlefield, they seem to flow by real choppy and they don't seem to connect. You don't see enough. And that's especially true when they get in the arena at the Roman Colosseum. And the gladiator, played by Russell Crowe, is rallying his fellow slaves to defend themselves against their attackers. And for some reason, Ridley Scott chose to film this with a real choppy style and a lot of cuts so that you just barely get a hint of what they're trying to do. Now, as I recall, the gladiator rallies his friends to form a turtle, which is a formation using shields so that the individual warrior is not vulnerable because all you see is shield. And it's used a lot in medieval fantasies and medieval war movies. Kingdom of Heaven is about the Crusades, and it couldn't be more different. This is another Ridley Scott film, and I highly recommend it. I've watched it many times. And what it comes down to is the defense of Jerusalem against the Arab armies. Who is this guy? Wait a minute. Orlando Bloom plays the protagonist. Believe it or not, he's very credible. Liam Neeson is in this too. Orlando Bloom is not known for being an action actor, but he does a great job here. And when he makes his way to Jerusalem, the Arab armies are massing to attack, and for some reason, the mantle of defending the city falls on Orlando Bloom's character, and they know they're vastly outnumbered. So before the armies get too close, he sends runners out. He has his archers shoot arrows, and they measure how far the arrow can go. They measure the accuracy, and then they run out and they plant stakes at those places, stakes with colored markers to indicate how far and the accuracy. And Orlando Bloom tells his archers, he says, do not fire until they reach these stakes. Don't shoot until you see the whites of their eyes. There's a lot more to it because the Arabs bring these siege engines, these towers that they raise to pour over the high walls. And the walls are very high. They're like at least 50 feet. But Bloom prepares for these with wrecking crews that seize the towers from the side where they're most vulnerable with chains and then drags them down into the dirt. It's a fascinating exercise in military tactics. And it's one of the things that makes the film so fascinating because, you know, we watch these movies not just as much to see how things are done as for the characters themselves. And I think that that's what tactics are all about, is how do they do that? How do you win a war against a superior opponent? Lawrence of Arabia, one of the greatest movies of all time. There are people out there who have not seen it. I urge you to see it. Your jaw will hit the floor, your head will explode. But for those who have seen it, they know the most famous scene where the Arabs, led by Lawrence, attacked Aqaba, which is on the Red Sea. They attack Aqaba. When they're prior to the attack, they say Aqaba is impregnable because they have these massive guns floating out to sea or aiming out to sea. But then Lawrence says the guns are fixed. They can't turn them around. We will attack from the land. But in order to attack from the land, they have to cross the empty quarter, a notorious stretch of desert where there's not a drop of water for hundreds of miles. And as they set out with their camels to cross the empty quarter, wait a minute. Anthony Perkins, no, wait. Anthony Quinn, there's so many great lines in this movie. Anthony Quinn is the leader of this rebel group of Arabs that Lawrence convinces to join them. And one of his famous lines is, "I am a river to my people." But as they set off across the empty quarter, he says, in 17 days, the camels will begin to die. And when they die, we die. So we watch them going across the empty quarter, where famously they leave one man behind by mistake, and Lawrence goes back and rescues him, thereby becoming a hero to the Arab people. But then finally, they attack Aqaba from the land. And the Turks are completely unprepared because they can't turn the guns around. It's a total rout. And that's how they win that battle. And finally, Red Cliff. This was directed by John Woo, and I think it's his masterpiece. It's an entirely Chinese production about the battle for the Han at the end of the Han Dynasty in 208 A.D., where you had a superior army prepared to overrun the Han Dynasty and an inferior army trying to protect it. And this is some of the most brilliant battle tactics you'll ever see in your life, and they rehearse them with their teams of horsemen and swordsmen and spear throwers, practicing their formations for when the enemy arrives. And you see how they do it. You see how they create a circle and they hide their archers inside the circle. And as the enemy approaches, they part, giving the archers room to shoot. It's just mesmerizing. It's a beautiful movie. It's totally fascinating. It makes war look a lot cleaner and more spectacular than it really is. But I can't recommend it too highly. So these are some of the movies that I enjoy because of what they show about military tactics.
All right, very good. Well, the normal questions. Any new projects going on or launching soon?
Well, you know, I have been asked by a publisher to adapt Laptop from Hell into a graphic novel. Oh, and we're going to launch Private American later this month.
Right.
Who is Private American? He's everything Captain America should be, but isn't. And when we first meet him, he's at the southern border.
Okay. And what is the Laptop from Hell supposed to be? Or do you want to not get into that?
Everybody knows that the Laptop from Hell belonged to Hunter Biden, who foolishly abandoned it at a store in New Jersey and never thought to reclaim it, and it fell into the hands of people who opened it up, who broke the code or the password, and it became a book. It's a very famous book out now called Laptop from Hell by Madeline Devine, and in which she writes about everything that's on the laptop, which of course is about Hunter learning to cook his own crack at the Hotel Marmot in Hollywood, about hiring expensive hookers, about escort services dunning him for his money, about all the sleazy deals and the boards of the corporate boards he was appointed to with no qualifications whatsoever, with $1 million salaries, and half of it all went to the big guy.
All right. Well, very good. Any words of wisdom for our audience?
As always, my friends, I urge you to take a hat.
Yes, Mike has a hat for every occasion. All right, thanks, and stay tuned. Please remember to subscribe, like, ring that bell. You know what to do. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.